Jeremy just came up with this topic a lot like when we were just doing the ego one. So I have no good recorded bit, and Jeremy didn't give us any sort of like dog food related fighting tactics. So we're just gonna get started. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, folks. Welcome to Friday Without Belts. Um, I'm gonna, but I have a gripe. I'm gonna put out there right now. If anybody who is podcasting, and they happen to work with Acast, keep all records because keep literally not just the receipts, but literally record everything that all the information RSS feed data. Because at this point of this recording, they've screwed everything up for our podcast. So I have no problem calling them out because they've made it harder for people to listen to this podcast. So if you're listening to this podcast, kudos to you. Jeremy, how the hell are you?
I'm doing pretty good. How you doing?
Outside that gripe I just aired to our listeners, because literally that is the thing that's stopping people from listening to us. So, rar. How's training been for you recently?
Other than a few days that I hurt my back, actually, I've been doing pretty decent. I mean, I've gotten to work on a lot of different stuff, so it's been good. And so, one thing in mind has been comma training. So I know it's the running joke of the podcast. I know I'm really trying to get over my dislike of that weapon. I'm getting to the point where I like it better, but it's not my go-to, but that's okay.
I'm trying to work out what exactly I need to do to create Bo and Joe. Like how exactly I should construct it. Because I can construct them fairly easily. I've had to move twice. Like last year I had to move twice, so I had to like give up both times my Bo and Joe just for like convenience reasons. But yeah, I really want to construct a Bo and a Joe, and then use what it is, but you then use our basically one method of self-defense in the schools as a Nunti bow. I told you about this, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Basically, it's a less pointy version, as it were.
Yeah.
But that's you look at how much that costs, which is like probably around $30. You look how much a Nunti bow costs.
Yeah.
Yeah, get the same effect. People look at you less strangely.
Training. Yeah. So no, that's cool.
Yeah. Aku is still a bit outside. Still waiting to figure out how to do that in a cost-effective manner.
I mean, worst case scenario, just go get a bow,
I mean, literally, like the only difference in the kata is that you probably have like a more like nuanced handle.
Yeah.
So just adds technique.
Just add a little extra. So what the heck?
Yeah. So, as we speak now, our dispatch correspondent Raul is coming back from a seminar in South Carolina. So at some point, possibly in the future, we might have a seminar report. It's one of the things that the pandemic screwed up that I actually wanted to start doing on this podcast is do like a seminar report type style type episodes where we like get people on and talk about how seminars went and stuff. So maybe, because I think it's one of the first ones that they've managed to have post COVID. That isn't like a Zoom seminar or like a purely online thing. So, but anyway, aside from that drop, Jeremy hit through two different Skype accounts of mine until he reached this one and had an amazing idea for today. Jeremy, I will allow you to introduce it. Be so kind.
All right. It's something that's kind of controversial, and it's kind of an uncomfortable topic, but it's like, but when do you correct or notify an instructor that either they're doing something wrong or dangerous? And how do you go about doing it?
I think there's a split point there, right?
Yeah.
You can have wrong and then you can have dangerous. Wrong can be somewhat subjective in that regard. Dangerous, fairly an objective point.
Yeah. Or I mean, if something's wrong, that could lead to something dangerous. So I mean, there's also that path as well too.
True. Where do we want to start on that? Something wrong or something wrong going to danger or danger?
Well, I mean, let's go. I mean, to me, I think one of the first things is how do you approach the instructor or the instructor's instructor, because it may be one of their instructors that is leading class.
Mm. What's interesting there is it also begs to whether or not something can be done. Let me back up on this. I've seen instructors have students, even senior students, who these instructors, these people who do martial arts, who are running schools, who aren't necessarily the primary teacher on the floor, because that teacher wants, that martial artist wants this person to get on the floor and get experience.
Mm-hmm.
But the person they've assigned is not necessarily at the same level of quality as the person who's in charge of things. And what is worse is that they've kind of delegated this position to others, and now you have this guy who can do it really, really well, who's head of the school, technically.
Mm-hmm.
But now he's got his number two or whatever teaching a bunch of people really incorrectly, either in emphasis or literal technique.
Yeah.
How to step into that? How to step into that hornet's nest and explain to somebody, hey, this isn't. You're not getting out of this person what you want.
Yeah. Now, yeah, and I think I've gone about it, several different ways. And don't get me wrong, I am not the grand poobah of all knowledge. I'm not. But I do. I know I'm at least open enough to where if somebody asks me, hey, or if they come up and ask me, hey, are you sure you're doing this right? And this even happened between you and I on some stuff that we were working on.
Mm.
And what was interesting is I had totally forgotten that I had broken down something to where it was just showing how to do the technique. And then I was going to come back and do the full technique, but it was like I was kind of halfway.
And the only reason that had happened is because something tangential to that had been shown to me, and I was like, it clicked something off in my head, and I was like, wait a minute. Well, if that's that, and that pretty much goes throughout everything, right? I think it was just like a matter of like positioning and stuff, and like weakness and strength.
It was actually something that I was trying to get some people's wrists to work a certain way to actually do the technique. And when I was teaching originally, I was like, okay, we're not getting it. And so if it's one person not getting it, it's like, okay, I got to work harder with that. If it's several people not getting it, I'm like, okay, how can I teach this a little differently?
Mm.
And so I made that shift to where it's like, okay, now they're getting this wrist motion in on it. And then it was like, you asked me about it, and I'm like, I'll have to go back and really kind of think about this, because I'd done it that way for so long, teaching people, and I'm like, yeah, I was wrong, and I was. And guess what? It happens to the best of us. It does. It even happens to the mediocre of us too. It's like,
and see on the audio version of this, Jeremy is pointing to himself when he's saying mediocre.
I mean, but I think as an instructor, you definitely need to be open to, if you're making a mistake, if it's going to cause a problem, if it's going to be dangerous, I think you definitely have to be open to critique, I guess. But that's part of it. But I think the main part of it is how do you approach an instructor?
Right, because
And,
you're the one who's ticking it off as one who sees problem, right?
right.
And how do we approach said problem?
Yeah, and you don't want to come across, especially to an instructor, another instructor is like, like almost like a pompous jerk. You don't want to do that.
Oh,
Which,
I think we can.
how many people have seen that? Guess what? That ends up being a brawl.
Well, I think we have it. We can kind of plan on someone we knew, um, who was close enough to what I think they considered the great source of knowledge. Is that whenever any time there would be some correction given on something, this person felt entitled to go around to everyone who wasn't in the room at the time and tell them they're wrong. And tell people who are more senior than them they're wrong. And do this, I think this went on for probably, 2 years or something like that, right? Maybe a little longer, right? But it was kind of quickly stopped. I mean, it was eventually kind of burned out. But yeah, the individual in mind, I think was well-meaning enough. But I think that came from more of an issue of, there's some corrections, and corrections are always given from somebody who's high up, right? And then maybe there's other people who are working with other people. For example, it's like if you're in an, I hate keep going back to this, but it's like if you're in an organization, right? And then you're with the person who's leading that organization, and you see a correction that they're doing to something, right? Or some sort of fix or whatever they're working on. And then there's other people around the world or the country or whatever who are teaching, have their own schools, have been doing this for a long time, and you see that they're not doing exactly the way that guy was doing it that night, right? We're not saying we are not saying this is what you should be doing is going out there and trying to
Right. No,
overcorrect
no, 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 no.
those people. We both been witness to this just continuing to go on for like 2-3 years or whatever. And it's on part of, because we're kind of starting from the, hey, don't do this part, but like it's one on the person who's in charge to be like, hey, don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't be that guy. All right. Um, there's lots of different ways of doing things. I believe what we're trying to get at is something that's blatantly, obviously wrong.
Yeah.
Right. Jeremy.
Oh.
Oh no, am I out? Am I pulling out on sound? Am I around
Yeah,
sound?
somehow I lost you there for a second. Sorry.
Oh
So
no. Okay. No. Yeah, for whatever reason, I got the super mic, so I've never done this on the podcast. I also have a voice of God.
Yeah.
So
All right.
we gotta get a correction on that later. But Jeremy, did you want to like go on that route with this, talking about things you've experienced recently?
Well, I mean, a little bit. I mean, I've noticed my son's in a class, and he's not even in this part of the class. And I noticed one instructor was just showing something as simple as a face block. And the way that they were transitioning would literally either tie them completely up if you were doing a face block with a weapon, you could seriously damage yourself.
Mm.
Like, I mean, I talk about comma quite lately. If you're using comma this way, you would literally cut one of your appendages off if you were doing it this way. And yeah, I mean, it's something simple. And some people's like, oh, the main thing is just to get to the ball, get to the result, get to the result. Well, there's a process to get to the result. And if you don't look at the process to get to the result, you can actually become it can be very detrimental. And it's the instructor that's there, the head instructor, I really respect them a lot. And so it's kind of like, I don't, I'm really having a difficult time trying to get with them and just show them like, is this how this is supposed to go? Is this, I'm trying to get to the point where I'm asking questions from them and stuff and show them like, I don't think this is the way it's supposed to go. And so I know it's something simple, but it's ingrained in your basics, in your basic knowledge, and just your overall muscle memory.
Mm.
And I thought about 4 or 5 different scenario or options where this could really become a problem. So it was, like I said, it's something simple, but down the road it could be something somewhat dangerous.
Right. And if you're not correcting the fundamentals, right, if you're not looking at the fundamentals to actually get, uh, especially if you're teaching kids or whatever.
Right.
And I think what is it? The example you were giving was like you're doing like the kind of face block with a comma going one way, you're fine. But if you're doing that comma going the other way,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
bye bye wrists.
Yeah. Or something else a little higher, whatever. So,
Yeah.
but anyway, you're going to end up with a nub. But anyway, so.
Yeah, and I think knowing how to approach that is key. So I think one method of being able to do that is, I think you have a very good position in doing that, is that person, assuming you're on a pretty good rapport with them, you can probably sit them
Yeah.
down and just,
Yeah.
hey, how about this? But that won't necessarily work out for everybody. So,
Right. Right. Now, come on to another situation where you've had this conversation and the instructor, how you say, becomes arrogant, basically calling you stupid.
defensive.
Yeah, they're offended, and you're not really trying to be. But, depending upon how they react to you, how are you going to react back? Now, I've had this situation, and it's the only time I really do that, get into that, is if I absolutely know something's wrong. And I mean, I to a T. Like, I mean, I'm willing to go all the way. And I remember one instance, I was telling another instructor that what they were doing was wrong. They were missing the completeness of the technique, things like that. And they weren't teaching the whole technique, and it was with bow.
Mm.
Yeah, and finally I'd had enough, and it was interesting because not only had I told them, but there had been several other senior students that had told them, like, look, this is not correct. we're telling you it's not correct. Oh, it's correct. You just don't know what you're talking. I mean, literally dismissed us like we were idiots. And so, you know, I guess that's kind of where my ego comes in because, I mean, you know, I don't know, when you've got a math and physics degree and somebody tells you you're an idiot, okay, it's time to prove you wrong, buddy. And so at that point, not only did I prove them wrong, I literally brought it in front of his entire instructor class and said, you're going to watch this video. This is from your instructor. And it wasn't, it just got to the point where I was like, look, dude, you're wrong. And so it finally got to the point where as soon as he saw it, he goes, I mean, he literally put his hands on his head like, oh my goodness, I am wrong. Finally, it was like.
Because you weren't trying to gas for ego. You were just trying to explain something. Like if I recall the situation correctly.
I was trying to explain something. I mean, after teaching it 20 some years that way and knowing, I mean, conviction, knowing with conviction that this is what's going on. You were taught this by not just one, two, I mean, several instructors you've seen this from. And
I also know the kata in question, literally, if you get 5 people in the same room to do it, that they're all going to do it a little differently. But it kind of comes out the same. And what you were pointing out was, interestingly enough, the one kata that ends up being like, some people like will go one way with it. One people throw a couple techniques here and there. We're talking specifically on a bow kata. For whatever reason, what's supposed to be the very basic beginning kata in our system, for whatever reason, gets this like variety packed version of it where people have seen, like, because different strikes have been thrown in, how transitions are done, like, have been thrown in different places. But what you were pointing out was just, okay, you do this one poke at this point, and you do this one little strike, which just literally goes throughout all. If you get all these different people in a room from different eras and whatever, they're all gonna say the same thing. It's like, yeah, that's how I learned it. Like,
yeah.
Except for what was being taught in that particular institution, which was not doing that for no reason.
Yeah. So exactly, and it was missing. It was missing the integrity of the actual technique, because it's like you couldn't, you'd work with somebody with the bow. It was like you'd work with them on technique. You do that technique, and somebody'd say, "Where'd you get that?" I'm like, "That's here. This is basic stuff."
Well, and it's like it's already in one part. Like, even though there was missing in other parts of that kata, it's still in that one part of the kata that they were teaching.
But that one part of the kata led into a lot of the other stuff too.
Yeah. So it's like, and that's where we can label this as, like, I don't want to say stupid argument, stupid arguments over nothing, but yeah, stupid arguments over nothing, where it's like, someone should have, the person in question should have been like, all right, that's how you learned it. All right.
Right.
Can you demonstrate and anyone else, or can you point to anybody else doing that? And that would have been kind of, the logical thing to do, because people forget stuff, even people who've been doing it for a while. Right?
Yeah.
Like, literally go back to the beginning of this conversation. There's something you had kind of glossed over, and then it kind of went out of your head space. And then I was like, hey, Jeremy, what about this? And you're like, oh yeah. Right. So, like, we had like the positive version of that conversation rather than the outright negative version.
But I think it also goes to that instructor also. How willing are you to receive any critique on stuff as well? And a lot of times, I mean, if you got a trusted person that's coming to you about something, maybe they're seeing something that you're not, or maybe you're not explaining something that they're not getting. And I've had that too. Such as if anybody's ever worked on Manji Sai, very difficult.
It's just literally our buddy Chuck has when he was taught Manji Sai. Remember,
What,
remember what he said about that, right?
what's that?
Remember our buddy Chuck, what he said about what learning Manji Sai in the beginning was.
Man, I'm getting old. I forgot, man.
And we're all getting old. It's basically how he had learned the second kata first because the first one was too hard.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't have that luxury. I learned the first kata, and that's where I'm still at. I'd like to go back and learn the second one, but if I do, great. If not, I'm cool with the first one.
I'm not gonna reveal your story on this, but Jeremy was like freaking Indiana Jones, putting the pieces together of parts of that kata and reconstructing it, reconfiguring it, mending the ship of Theseus into its original parts and making sure other people knew it. We don't give you enough credit for other people actually knowing that kata because of the work you did in order to figure it out, rather than quite a few other people who really don't have it anymore.
Yeah, and it was just, yeah. I mean, it was so, yeah. That was intense. But I mean, I've had people, because there are certain parts that kata is like, why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? Why is this? Why is, I mean, and I get it, because I mean, it's like, until you actually figure out the actual application of it, some of those movements, it's like, yeah, this makes absolutely no sense. Why would you do this? Why would you do that? I get it. I totally get it. But I've had people ask me, hey, I'm not getting this. Cool. And then I've had someone come up to me and is like, man, you must be stupid. This doesn't work. I actually had somebody tell me that. That's one of the more mad moments I've ever had.
Someone just coming up to you and just being like criticizing
I
you for
mean,
something they don't. Well, I
yeah,
don't know how you criticize someone for a kata that you don't understand. That's one thing I don't get.
yeah,
Like how do you criticize someone for being like, this is terrible, this doesn't work at all? It's like, well, if you don't understand, what do you criticize?
yeah, you're just not totally getting it. Or, hey, I'll even take part of the blame. Maybe I hadn't shown you something about it, and that's cool. I take blame on that. There's sometimes I'll say, hey, do this, boom, 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 and you know, 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, I'll forget that I even told you that. It happens, and I get it.
And I
But
think where I think a
but
lot of this.
but I think it is how you interact with instructors and people who are actually teaching this stuff.
Yeah, and unfortunately, karate has this very over defensive version of like knowledge. Like when you learn something, like and people, we've had the delight of being a part of groups who loved yelling at each other about this. Um, where it's like you're trying to defend the knowledge or like the memory of it, right? But if you don't have the basics of it down correctly, it doesn't matter what the moves are.
Right.
Like this isn't gonna if you don't understand how to make it work, or you don't understand if you like are just, I don't know, if you're not putting the emphasizes where they are, if you're like literally just, I don't know, just regurgitating stuff without understanding. We talked about that a little before, but it's like then you leave yourself open to criticism. You're always going to be left open to criticism in that regard. Which is where like karate has the chasing knowledge issue, where
Yeah.
you end up with people like me, Marty and I have had conversations about this too. You and I have had conversations about this where it's like we sometimes at some points just don't know where to start or don't know how to kind of peel this back to what's most important. Because there's just too much crap out there. So we get
Yeah.
into the weeds on like this, that, and the other
Right.
without having kind of like a going back to basics on stuff. It's like even with Majisai or something like that, or something that's obscure as like Nunti, um, where it's like, okay, yeah, but you have to peel that back to basics and how is that done. Um, you can create as many curriculums as you want, but if it's not in your bones, it's not in your bones.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, exactly. So it just, it goes back to, personal interaction a lot of times.
yeah,
And I think sometimes we're guilty of just not being able to really discuss things because, as an instructor, you have uh, your cohorts, people that you hang around with that are, you're always sharing knowledge within each other in that whatever that circle of trust or however you want to call it.
mm.
And then you've got students, and so sometimes it is, yeah, like if you're teaching something even to another instructor, it's like sometimes it's hard to separate that instructor bond and instructor student bond, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and like even when you're within a cohort and then someone comes in from outside and starts saying something, you end up with echo chamber issues,
Yeah.
where it's like, oh yeah, that guy was wrong, that guy's an idiot, he doesn't, and like making up justifications or something like that, which ends up happening a lot. And I don't know, we're all guilty of that to a degree. We can't
Yeah.
really help it,
Well,
but
I think it's also something that we have to grow through as an instructor. Yeah, I mean, it comes up. Don't get me wrong, it comes up, but how do you grow through it? Not so much let that hamper your teaching or your training or anything else. There's probably, I mean, I know there's stuff that I do that's probably, you know, might be incorrect or whatever, but yeah, I mean, the only thing I can do is just keep searching, keep training. So
well, I think it really has to come from the interactions with people. It's like if you can't, you have to be before you even begin to be able to give people criticism, you need to have been always been willing to take criticism.
yeah,
If you weren't able to, if you are just always the person, if you are the internet troll, right, who is just criticizing everybody or just being very negative towards somebody. Um, I had a conversation with somebody else today, or with somebody else the other day, where they were like, they posted one thing and then somebody came at them over like, how dare you do that to your body? You should be only be perfecting your form. You should not be overexerting yourself or something like that. Like kind of like the kind of one of the weirdest things you see somebody post on like a martial arts forum or something like that. It's like,
well, or
but it's like, all right, what, you have no goal here. You're just kind of
yeah,
you have no actual construction to the critics. You're just being critical to be
you
critical.
know, it goes back to, and part of why I came up with this topic, and I don't want it to be controversial. I'm going to talk about this
Mm.
a little bit, and I'm just going to kind of where it kind of lit a fire under it is we were doing a Bible study in part of the Bible, and it really got to the point where Jesus talks about, you know, okay, yeah, you're doing all the right things, but you're not really owning it. I mean, it's it's not exactly that, but it's like, okay,
Thou
you're
shalt
going.
own thy
Well,
gifts.
well,
Yeah,
I mean,
I get what you're saying.
it's like you're going through the motions, but you're not really understanding what needs to be done. And I look at that. How many times, how many times in karate do we see people just strive to go get a black belt? How many times do we see somebody try to go get a fifth degree black belt, seventh degree black belt? And not saying that they don't know knowledge, but they may not be able to own it or be able to apply it. And
well,
that's kind of what really, I mean, I was dealing with this issue, but then we started talking about that, and I'm like, man, that's really relevant. I mean, it's really, it goes hand in hand on this.
well, because then you're getting a lot of people who are, I mean, we're going back to correcting an instructor, right? Correcting
Right,
someone
right.
who is being either self-proclaimed or other people are saying who is an instructor, but are doing things wrong. I think
But,
this.
oh, go ahead,
Yeah,
sorry.
go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, but I think where I'm leading at is, I mean, it is part of your growth and development as an instructor. Part of it is monkey see, monkey do. Okay, I saw this, I'm going to teach this. I saw this, I'm going to teach this. Instead of, I saw this, why am I doing this? Now I'm going to teach this to this person to make sure that they understand it. If that, and I guess that's some of the things that I see even today.
Yeah,
Does that
because
does that make sense? So
yeah, because well, and like this is a problem that somebody had talked about before. Was like I mean, it goes back to they don't have their goes back to this. They don't have their basics down. They see something they want to they want to work on, but the idea of work on and teach are two different things, right?
but where's the responsibility lie at?
Them.
Does it lie at the student or does it lie at the instructor who's not teaching the understanding?
Well, I mean, it's the students. It's always and ever anybody who pursues martial arts ultimate prerogative is to gain understanding. If you're not
Yeah,
seeking that, that's on you. But as a teacher, you should understand that. But if you don't, like, you should understand that. But you should also understand just because you learned something new. And I mean, like, one point is it just learn something new is that learn something new is just a new kata, right?
yeah.
Or something like that.
A new
And then
technique, new something. Yeah, anything.
exactly. And then like why is that new for you? And like then why do you feel that and it's like also leveling the student. And I hate even putting it like that, but it's like, okay, why are you working on this with that particular student? Why are you doing this with that particular student? Sometimes it's out of necessity, you just need somebody to hit you.
Right.
But you gotta work on stuff, right? You can't work on everything solo. Um And I think that's okay if you can understand. All right, you aren't meant to learn anything. The thing you're meant to learn is to try to hit me or try to land one on me.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to teach you this technique. Um, I'm trying to work on this technique. It should be a learning experience for everybody. This is where I feel karate really does miss out in terms of not having a very solid, other than sparring, a very solid two-man setup, two-man platform, as it were. Right? We don't really
Yeah.
have that. We don't really have like a pattern that we go with in order to work on. Our niece says that a lot of other arts have that, but karate, you have to kind of create one in order to make that work.
Yeah. I've seen different styles have that. Some styles have it, some styles don't. Some people teach it, some people don't. Um, Me, I concentrate more on technique. That's usually where I concentrate more on. Um, but that's me too. I
Yeah.
mean,
And
it, it,
then it's like, I'm not going to go up to you and be like, you're doing this wrong. You need to be doing it this way, right? I can
right,
suggest like, what if we approach it this way, right? What if we approached it that way?
right,
And like, there's a way of going about it where it's approaching it where is a non-dangerous thing, is a non-vital thing, but actually might have a benefit in the end, right? Now, I guess we can kind of take this out to talk about danger. Um, can we go from kind of yellow to red and then just say, okay, where's the danger zone? When do we have to actually? When do people actually need to step in?
right,
I guess in that regard.
right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so I guess that's kind of. I mean, we got on the podcast because it's kind of something I brought up, but it's also something I'm kind of talking myself through on how to approach the situation, But I mean, I kind of know how to approach it. It's just,
I guess here's my question. At what point? Here's a good one. Here's a good example. Somebody who's never full contact fighted and putting them in a full contact situation. Is that something that needs to be stopped?
yeah, that's, I mean, that's a recipe for disaster, which I think both of us have seen that.
I've experienced it.
You felt it.
Yeah,
Sorry, man.
we've talked about that before, right?
Yeah.
Um, and even if someone's like they're an adult, they're willing to do that, right? We're not talking about like putting kids in a full contact situation.
Oh, why not? No, sorry. Yes. Sorry. My inner voice came out.
Uh,
Sorry.
no, it's all right. I mean, it's you're not gonna put a 12-year-old in. Teaching sparring to kids is in itself somewhat of a controversial topic to a degree.
Yeah.
Personally, I think you do low to no contact with them at first, it's fine, and then once they hit 18, I'm good with low to no. With that.
That, that, that brings up a story of two kids that I taught a long time ago. It was a brother and sister, and I got them all suited up and padded up, and and got them ready, fighting stance, and Hajime. And his sister was like a year younger, so she wasn't quite getting the hang of it. And all of a sudden, he just comes up and boom, hits her, and I mean, she falls right in. I was like, okay. I was like, are you okay? And then she gets up, she's laughing. Yeah, that was fun. Can I do that again? Just
Well, at
sorry.
least she's in good spirits.
Yeah, I mean, I felt horrible about it. And sure enough, Hajime, boom, hit her again. Bam. She's still laughing about it. I was like, oh.
How old were these
But,
kids?
oh, they were what, maybe 9 and 10, or
Jeez.
maybe 8 and 9. I don't know, but
I
it
mean,
was
at
funny.
what point is that not child? I don't want to say child abuse because you're not the one actually doing it, but uh, at what point was
But
that neglect?
well, I mean, well, it's funny. She was laughing. Then the brother asked, "Hey, can I do that again?" It's like, I don't know if that was payback to the sister or what, but I was like, all right.
I do
So,
remember when I was a kid that when I like had turned 13 when I suddenly like body like just kind of blew up like and then I had an older sibling who was just used to pushing me out of the way if they ever wanted anything. And then I think it was like 6 months of karate at that point, something like that, like very very not a lot. I just punched them once. I said back off, and they like ran out of the house.
mhm.
It's just like, all right, we're not doing that again. And I was like, well, if you weren't a piece of crap from the start, we wouldn't have to be here now, would we?
Yeah.
Um,
So sorry, as we digress. I didn't mean to digress on that, but
well, and because this is, I mean, that's an important part of that because contextually, it's like, okay, if I was like just out of context, seeing that, right, and hearing, okay, an 8 and a 9-year-old were getting full contact gear on and hitting each other. okay, we need to call the police.
Yeah.
We gotta break this up. But from like, you know, if it's a brother and sister and the parents are there and they say it's okay and no one's really getting hurt, all right.
Yeah.
Well, there is the whole thing of growth plates and all that. But, you know,
But
we're karate people, not scientists.
yeah, yeah, toughen up a little bit, you know. Come on. No, but anyway,
You damaged
it's
the growth plate. Walk it off.
yeah. Rub some dirt on it and get over it, you know. Or can get over it. Come on, let's go. Yeah, but I don't know. I think it's definitely an interesting conversation, and I think a lot of us don't think about it, but it's like, yeah, we go and do it. But I think a lot of times when we go to, I wouldn't say confront, but communicate with that other instructor, a lot of times we're looking at it from our point of view, and sometimes we're not looking at it from their point of view, and just not trying to work out the best solution overall. You know, and I'm not trying to bring in a bunch of touchy feely stuff, but I think it is something that definitely needs to be addressed, because if you approach somebody your way, they may not take it your way, and then you have, you know, contention between the two of you, and then that starts eroding, you know, trust and everything else that the two of you got. So
It's knowing when to step in and not to even step in, because there's a difference between step in, right? It's literally walking on the floor and saying, "Don't do that," right, in front of the person. Which, sorry, that's not gonna be good for anybody, right? As opposed
right,
to taking them aside and saying something, right? And there's a big difference between people like you and me who've been doing this for a little while and somebody who's just right on, like who hasn't done it for a while, might actually have a good point,
right,
right? So
exactly. So no, that's cool. So
cool, cool. I think that gets us to the end there. Oh, oh no, oh no, Jeremy, are you
oh
there?
yeah, I'm here now. So
Oh no, okay, good, all right. So I think that brings us about to the end there. Um, Anything else we want to tap on that?
no, I think that's good though. So
Cool, cool. Jeremy, what's on the docket for training this week?
all, all I know is, this week's going to be extremely busy for my company. That's, I mean, if I get to train Annie, I'm going to be happy. So it's yeah, it's yeah, we've got a guy that's potentially leaving, so we're trying to get everything turned over and all that kind of stuff, and that takes a while. So
Okay. Hopefully
but
you get something in.
yeah, work on comma more, but you know, so
There you go.
anyway,
I'm hoping to just to do a hard Kobudo week. Like one each day, do something else. But like just do a hard Kobudo week and really kind of break winter's like spell on me through doing that. So yeah, Kobudo and running.
that's cool. Cool, cool,
Cool.
cool.
Well, Jeremy, thanks for getting on and coming up with a great topic. Always good to have you on as usual. And thanks everyone for listening. Be well, be good. Hopefully the RSS feed is fixed by the time anyone's listening to this. And don't forget to keep on training.